A newlywed couple are in bed together. The wife reaches over to grab her husband. "Oh my God, it's so big," she said. The husband gave a pleased hum. "Are they all this big?" she asked. "More or less," he said. "It's halfway down your thigh," she exclaimed. "Yeah," he said, nonplussed. "I want this so bad," she moaned. "I can see that," he replied, amused. "Half the time the pockets on my pants are fake." A farmer is lying in bed with his wife when he turns to her, gives her a playful smile, and says, "Honey, if we could get milk from these, we could sell the cow." Then he moves his hand lower and adds, "And if we could get eggs from here, we could sell the chickens." She turns to him, grins, grabs his equipment and says, "Honey, if we could get this working, I could get rid of your brother sleeping on the couch." A man asked his wife a serious question. "If I died tomorrow, would you get remarried?" She paused and replied softly, "Well, I'm still young, and I wouldn't want to be alone, so probably yes." "Would you stay in this house?" he asked. "I think so. I really love this place." "Would you let him drive my truck?" "It's a good truck," she said with a smile, "and I do enjoy driving it myself." He nodded slowly. "Okay, but would you let him use my golf clubs?" She looked at him and said, "No, he's left-handed." A fireman comes home and says to his wife, "At the station we have a great system. Bell 1 means we put on our gear. Bell 2 means we slide down the pole. Bell 3 means we're on the truck and off to the fire. So from now on, let's use that system at home. Bell 1, you get undressed. Bell 2, jump in bed. Bell 3, we get things going." That night he comes home and shouts, "Bell 1. His wife undresses. Bell 2, she jumps into bed. Bell 3. They start getting busy. 2 minutes in, she shouts, "Bell 4. He pauses and asks, "Bell 4. What's that?" She replies, "More hose. You're nowhere near the fire." A guy comes home from work and he is quite upset. His wife looks worried and asks him what's wrong. He shakes his head and refuses to say anything. Later, during dinner, he's just pushing his food around on his plate and staring out the window. "Honey, what is it? I've never seen you like this before." The wife says, "It's nothing," he says. "I can't burden you with my problems. It wouldn't be fair, your problems." The wife says, "We are partners. We face everything together. Your problem is my problem. There is no I, just we. Now please, tell me, what is it?" "Well," he says, looking up at her glumly, "we got our secretary pregnant and now she's suing us for support." During a visit to the local mental institute, John asked the director during a tour how to determine whether or not a patient should be institutionalized. "It's simple, actually," said the director. "We fill up a bathtub, then we offer a teaspoon, a teacup, and a bucket to the patient. We ask him or her to empty the bathtub." "Oh, I understand. Obviously a normal person would choose the bucket because it's bigger than the spoon or the teacup. No, a normal person would pull the plug and let it drain. Do you want a bed near the window?" When Dennis got married, it was on the building site. After some time, Jack said to Dennis, "Still having fun with the missus every day?" Dennis replied, "Yes, every day." "Every day? Frank, have you tried a little bit up the other hole?" Dennis, "Oh no, I couldn't do that. She's the vicar's daughter." Frank said, "Come on, you've been married 2 years. It's time to shake things up. Just ask her tonight." Dennis, "I daren't." Frank, "Go on. You've been married so long now." Dennis, "I will. I'll ask her in the night." Frank, "You've been giving her one every day for 2 years now, so it's time for a bit of a change." Dennis, "I'll ask her in the night then." He came in the next morning, and Frank was quick to ask him, "So, did you talk to her?" Dennis, "Well, I did ask her, but she said that we still can't afford children yet." While having a little fun, a young Irish couple was getting caught up in the moment. The girl suddenly said, "This doesn't feel right." The guy leaned in and whispered, "But I love you." She replied softly, "It still feels wrong." Trying to be smooth, he said, "Come on, we're gonna get married anyway." She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "I'm not talking about commitment, genius. You're aiming for the wrong driveway." Settled in, he sees a strikingly beautiful woman boarding. To his delight, she takes the seat beside him. Eager to strike up a conversation, he says, "Business trip or holiday?" She smiles and says, "Business, the annual convention in New York." The man swallows hard. Struggling to maintain his composure, he asks, "What's your role at the convention then?" "Lecturer," she responds. "I use my experience to debunk some of the popular myths about Really?" the man says. "What myths are those?" Well, the woman explains one popular myth is that African men are the best endowed when in fact it's the Native American Indians. Another misconception is that Frenchmen are the world's best lovers, when in fact men of Jewish descent are the best in bed. We have, however, found that the best overall lovers are the rednecks from southern USA. Suddenly, the woman becomes a little uncomfortable and blushes. "I'm really sorry," she says. "I shouldn't really be discussing this with you. I don't even know your name." "Tonto." The man says, "Tonto Goldstein. But my friends call me Bubba." A mechanic, an engineer, and a computer scientist are traveling together in a car when the motor suddenly fails. The mechanic and engineer each try various techniques to restart the car. "Pump the accelerator a couple of times," says the mechanic. "No," replies the engineer. "Turn the ignition key without touching the pedal." The car refuses to start. After the failure of several more attempts, the computer scientist confidently announced his solution. "Let's all get out of the car, then get back in." George W. was out jogging one morning along the parkway when he tripped, fell over a bridge railing, and landed in the creek below. Before the Secret Service could get to him, 3 kids who were fishing nearby pulled him out of the water. "Grateful," George said. "You kids saved me. I'll give you anything you want." The first kid said, "I want to go to Disneyland." George replied, "No problem. You'll go on Air Force One." The second kid said, "I want a new pair of Nike Air Jordans." George said, "Consider it done. I'll even have Michael Jordan sign them." The third kid said, "I want a motorized wheelchair with a built-in TV and stereo headset." George looked confused and said, "But you seem perfectly fine." The kid replied, "Yeah, I am, but I won't be after my dad finds out I saved you from drowning." Grandpa was celebrating his 100th birthday. Everybody complimented him on how healthy, athletic, and well-preserved he appeared. "I will tell you the secret of my success," Grandpa said. "My wife and I were married 75 years ago. On our wedding day, we made a solemn pledge. Whenever we had an argument or fight, the one who proved wrong would go outside and take a walk for 5 kms. Gentlemen, I have been walking in the open air day after day for some 75 years now." One friend further asked, "But your wife is also slim and energetic," Grandpa said. "That is another secret. My wife used to follow me behind checking whether I go for 5 kms or sit in a park." A young monk arrives at the monastery. He is assigned to helping the other monks in copying the old canons and laws of the church by hand. He notices, however, that all of the monks are copying from copies, not from the original manuscript. So the new monk goes to the old abbot to question this, pointing out that if someone made even a small error in the first copy, it would never be picked up. In fact, that error would be continued in all of the subsequent copies. The head monk says, "We have been copying from the copies for centuries, but you make a good point, my son." He goes down into the dark caves underneath the monastery where the original manuscripts are held as archives in a locked vault that hasn't been opened for hundreds of years. Hours go by and nobody sees the old abbot. So, the young monk gets worried and goes down to look for him. He sees him banging his head against the wall and wailing, "We missed the R. We missed the R. We missed the R. We missed the R." His forehead is all bloody and bruised and he is crying uncontrollably. The young monk asks the old abbot, "What's wrong, father?" With a choking voice, the old abbot replies, "The word was celebrate." George and a Newfie feller were both patients in a mental hospital in St. John's Sea. One day, while they were walking past the hospital swimming pool, George suddenly jumped into the deep end. He sank to the bottom of the pool and stayed there. The Newfie promptly jumped in to save him. He swam to the bottom and pulled George out. When the medical director became aware of the Newfie's heroic act, he immediately ordered him to be discharged from the hospital, as he now considered him to be mentally stable. When he went to tell the Newfie the news, he said, "Newfie, I have good news and bad news. The good news is you're being discharged since you were able to rationally respond to a crisis by jumping in and saving the life of another patient. I have concluded that your act displays sound thinking and judgment. The bad news is, George, the patient you saved, hung himself in the bathroom with his bathrobe belt right after you saved him. I am so sorry, but he's dead." The Newfie replied he didn't hang himself. "I put him there to dry, so how soon can I go home?" A teenage girl brought her new boyfriend home to meet her parents. They were appalled by his leather jacket, motorcycle boots, tattoos, and pierced nose. Later, the parents pulled their daughter aside and confessed their concern. "Dear," the mother said, "he doesn't seem very nice." "Oh, please, Mom," the daughter replied. "If he wasn't nice, why would he be doing 200 hours of community service?" A man walks into a bar and heads straight to the counter. Without saying a word, he pulls out a tiny piano and a little man about a foot tall from his jacket. The tiny guy hops onto the bar and starts playing a beautiful classical piece. The bartender is stunned. "That's incredible. Where on earth did you find him?" The man pulls out an old lamp and sets it on the counter. "I just rubbed this lamp and made a wish," he says. "Want to give it a try?" The bartender, curious and excited, grabs the lamp and gives it a good rub. Poof! Suddenly the bar is filled with a million ducks. Flapping, quacking, chaos everywhere. The bartender shouts, "What the heck? I didn't wish for a million ducks." The man shrugs and says, "Yeah, you really think I wished for a 12-inch pianist?" Yesterday, my daughter sent me an email, once again suggesting I find something useful to do with my time. Apparently, relaxing by the pool with a nice glass of wine doesn't qualify as productive in her book. She went on to say she was only thinking of me and suggested I visit the local senior center to socialize with others. Taking her advice, I decided to give it a try. But when I got home, I thought it was time to have a little fun with her. I sent her an email and told her I'd joined a club. "A parachute club," I wrote. Her reply came almost immediately. "Are you serious? You're 73 years old and now you're jumping out of airplanes." I replied back, attaching a photo of my new membership card. Moments later, she called, clearly alarmed. "Dad, this can't be real. Are you actually planning to jump?" I laughed and reassured her. "Don't worry. I just wanted to see your reaction. Life as a senior may come with its challenges, but sometimes it's a whole lot of fun." A new boss was setting up his computer, and his secretary was assisting him with the process. As she reached the part where he needed to choose a password, she asked, "What word would you like to use?" With a mischievous grin and wanting to tease her a bit, he smugly replied, "Type in P." Without hesitation, she entered the word as instructed, remaining completely professional. Moments later, the computer displayed its response, "Password rejected, not long enough." The secretary burst out laughing, leaving her boss red-faced and speechless. Two elderly gentlemen, one 80 and the other 87, were sitting on a park bench one sunny morning. The 87-year-old had just finished his daily jog, looking as fresh as ever and not even slightly out of breath. Impressed by his vigor, the 80-year-old asked, "What's your secret? How do you have so much energy at your age?" The 87-year-old grinned and said, "Simple, rye bread. I eat it every single day. Keeps my energy up and works wonders with the ladies too." Intrigued, the 80-year-old decided to give it a try. On his way home, he stopped by a bakery. As he browsed the shelves, the sales lady approached and asked, "Can I help you find something? Do you have rye bread?" he asked eagerly. "Of course," she replied, pointing to a shelf stacked with loaves. "How many would you like?" "5 loaves," he declared confidently. Surprised, she said, "5 loaves, sir? By the time you get through the third one, it'll be hard." The old man paused for a moment and then said, "Wow, it seems like everyone but me knows about this stuff." After 25 years of marriage, Jake left his wife, Edith, for a much younger secretary. His new flame insisted they live in Jake and Edith's luxurious multi-million-dollar home. Jake's sharp lawyers ensured he won the house, and he gave Edith just 3 days to pack up and leave. On the first day, Edith methodically packed her belongings into boxes, crates, and suitcases. On the second day, movers arrived to take her things away. On the third day, Edith decided to savor her last evening in the house. She set a candle-lit dinner at the elegant dining table, played soft music, and treated herself to a decadent meal of shrimp, caviar, and Chardonnay. When the meal was done, Edith wandered through the house with a mischievous smile. In every single room, she stuffed the hollow curtain rods with the remains of her feast, shrimp shells and dollops of caviar. Satisfied, she tidied the kitchen and left the house for good. Jake and his new girlfriend moved in, delighted with their victory. For the first few days, everything was perfect. But then, an inexplicable stench began to fill the house. They scrubbed, mopped, and aired out every room. They checked the vents for dead animals, cleaned the carpets, and hung air fresheners everywhere. Nothing helped. Desperate, they called in exterminators, who fumigated the house, forcing them to stay in a hotel for a few days. When that failed, they replaced the carpets and even repainted the walls. Still, the stench persisted. The smell became so unbearable that friends stopped visiting, repair workers refused to enter, and even their maid quit. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, they decided to sell the house. But no one wanted to buy a property with such a horrible reputation. Even after slashing the price in half, there were no takers. The stench had made the house uninhabitable. Facing financial ruin, Jake and his girlfriend borrowed money from the bank to buy a new home. One day, Edith called Jake to check in. Feigning concern, she asked how things were going. Jake poured out his woes, lamenting the nightmare of the stinky house. Edith listened sympathetically and casually mentioned how much she missed her old home. She even offered to buy it back at a fraction of its original value. Jake, desperate to be rid of the cursed property, jumped at the offer. Within hours, the deal was finalized, and Edith became the proud owner of her old home once again. A week later, Jake and his girlfriend gleefully watched their moving company pack up their belongings to take to their new house, including the curtain rods. A curious child asked his dad, "Hey, how were people born?" The dad, thinking he'd give a simple answer, said, "Well, Adam and Eve had babies. Then their babies grew up and had more babies, and that's how we got here." Excited to get a second opinion, the child ran to his mom and asked, "How were people born?" She replied, "Well, we were all monkeys once, then over millions of years we evolved into humans." The child ran back to his dad, eyes wide, and shouted, "You lied to me." The dad, without missing a beat, said, No, I just told you about my side of the family. Your mom's side? Well, that's a whole different story." A nun is sitting on a bus when a hippie plops down next to her. After a moment, he leans in and asks, "Hey, you want to make love?" The nun gasps. "No, God forbids it." She gets off at the next stop. As the hippie gets ready to leave the bus a few minutes later, the driver waves him over. "Hey, man, I heard what you said to the nun. Listen, I've got a tip for you. She goes to pray at her father's grave at St. Martin's Cemetery every Sunday at 10 a.m. The hippie grins. "Thanks, dude." Sunday morning rolls around and the hippie shows up at the cemetery dressed as Jesus. He spots the nun praying and says, "My child, I have come to earth to love with you." The nun gasps. "If it is God's will, I must obey." So they go behind a bush and get to it. After they're done, the hippie rips off his costume and shouts, "Ha, gotcha. I'm the hippie." The nun pulls off her habit and shouts back, "Ha, gotcha. I'm the bus driver." Every Friday night after work, Bubba would fire up his grill and cook some delicious venison steaks. But all of Bubba's neighbors were Catholic, and during Lent they couldn't eat meat on Fridays. The mouth-watering aroma of Bubba's steaks was causing quite the stir, so they decided to talk to their priest. The priest came over to Bubba's house and suggested, "Bubba, why don't you become Catholic? That'll solve the problem." So Bubba went through some classes, studied hard, and finally attended Mass. As the priest sprinkled holy water over him, he said, "You were born a Baptist, raised a Baptist, but now you are a Catholic." The neighbors were thrilled. Finally, peace. But when Friday night came around, that familiar smell of grilled venison filled the air again. The neighbors were furious. They called the priest, and he rushed over ready to give Bubba a stern talking to. But when he got to the backyard, he froze. There was Bubba, standing by the grill, holding a small bottle of holy water. He carefully sprinkled the meat and said, "You was born a deer, you was raised a deer, but now you is a catfish." A husband returned home to find his wife in tears at the front door. She looked up at him and wailed, "It's the pharmacist. He was so rude to me this morning on the phone. I called him multiple times, and when he finally picked up, he insulted me terribly." Determined to defend his wife's honor, the husband rushed downtown to find the chemist and demand an apology. Before he could even speak, the pharmacist held up his hand. "Hold on a second," the pharmacist said. "You've only heard one side of the story. Let me explain what happened." He took a deep breath and started, "This morning my alarm didn't go off, so I woke up late. I skipped breakfast and rushed out the door, only to realize I had locked myself out of the house, both my keys and my phone inside. I had to break a window to get back in." The husband stood there, listening as the pharmacist continued, "I finally got in the car, but I was in such a hurry that I got a speeding ticket. Then, a few blocks from the store, I got a flat tire. When I finally got to work, there was a line of customers waiting for me." He paused and added, "So I opened the store, started helping customers, and of course the phone's ringing off the hook the whole time. I'm juggling it all when I tried to open a roll of quarters for change, and it spilled everywhere. I bent down to pick them up, and you guessed it, the phone is still ringing. Then, as if that wasn't enough, I stood up too quickly and cracked my head on the cash register drawer. I stumbled back, knocking over a display of expensive perfume. Bottles shattered everywhere, and the phone kept ringing." He looked at the husband, finally catching his breath. "I went to pick up the phone, and your wife was on the line." The husband raised an eyebrow. "And?" The pharmacist threw his hands up. "She asked me how to use a rectal thermometer, and all I did was tell her the instructions." The first grade teacher was beginning a new lesson on multi-syllable words. She decided to ask the children for examples of words with more than one syllable. "Jane, do you know any multi-syllable words?" After a moment of thought, Jane proudly responded, "Monday." "Great, Jane, that's 2 syllables. Monday. Does anyone know another word?" I do. Me, exclaimed Johnny. Knowing Johnny's tendency for humor, she decided to call on Mike instead. "Okay, Mike, what's your word?" "Saturday," Mike answered confidently. "Great, that's 3 syllables. Not wanting to be outdone, Johnny chimed in, "I know a 4-syllable word, pick me." Hoping Johnny wouldn't go too far, the teacher hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. "All right, Johnny, what's your 4-syllable word?" Johnny grinned and proudly said, "Masturbachian." The teacher, shocked, tried to maintain her composure and said, "Well, Johnny, that's certainly a mouthful." Johnny, with a mischievous grin, responded, "No, ma'am, you're thinking of something else, and that's only 2 syllables." At the pearly gates, an elderly gentleman stands before St. Peter. "All you need is one good deed, and we'll let you into heaven," St. Peter says. The old man smiles. "No problem. Just a few minutes ago, I was driving when I saw a motorcycle gang harassing a young woman at an intersection. I pulled over, marched right up to the biggest, meanest biker. He had to be over 7 feet tall and 400 pounds, and told him that picking on a woman was a cowardly act. I wasn't going to stand for it." St. Peter leans in, intrigued. "And then what?" Well, the man continues. "I reached up, yanked out his nose ring, and gave him a swift kick where it counts, just to drive the point home." St. Peter flips through the book of life, frowning. "That's not in here. When exactly did this happen?" The old man glances at his watch. "About 5 minutes ago." Sam and Becky are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. As they sit together, Sam, feeling a bit curious, turns to Becky and says, "Becky, I have to ask you something. Have you ever cheated on me?" Becky, taken aback, glances at him and responds, "Sam, why on earth would you ask something like that now? It's not a question you should be asking." But Sam, with a serious look on his face, insists, "No, I really want to know. Please, tell me." Becky sighs, then reluctantly says, "Well, all right, Sam. Yes, 3 times. Sam, a little shocked, asks, 3 times? When did this happen?" Becky pauses for a moment before speaking. "Well, Sam, remember when you were 35 and you were desperate to start your own business, but no bank would give you a loan. Then out of nowhere, the president of the bank came over and signed the loan papers, no questions asked." Sam's eyes widen in realization. "Wait, you did that for me?" he says, clearly moved. "Becky, I can't believe you did that. I respect you so much for what you did. You went above and beyond for me. I didn't even know." Becky nods, then continues. "And then remember when you had that terrible heart attack, and no surgeon was willing to take on such a risky operation. But then Dr. DeBakey himself came to your rescue, performing the surgery and saving your life." Sam, now deeply touched, replies, "I can't even imagine what you went through to arrange that, Becky. You truly saved my life. You've always been there for me. I'm more grateful than I can put into words. You are incredible, my love." And for the 3rd time, "What happened?" Becky hesitates for a moment, then says with a wry smile, "Well, Sam, remember that time a few years ago when you were desperate to become president of the golf club, and you were 17 votes short of winning?" Sam's eyes widen, and he finally understands, breaking into a grin. "Wait a minute, Becky, you didn't." With a smile, she replies, "Yes, Sam, I did. You really wanted that position, and I made sure you got it." Sam laughs out loud, shaking his head. "I can't believe it. You've done so much for me over the years, Becky. You've truly been my rock." Becky smiles softly, her eyes twinkling. "Well, Sam, after 50 years, I thought it was time you knew the truth." An airplane was about to crash. There were 5 passengers on board, but only 4 parachutes. The first passenger said, "I am President Obama, the chosen one. The world needs me. I can't afford to die." So he took the first parachute and left the plane. The second passenger, Tony Abbott, said, "I am the Prime Minister of Australia, and I am the smartest man in Australian history, so Australia's people don't want me to die." He took the second parachute and jumped out of the plane. The third passenger, John Kerry, said, "I'm a senator and a decorated war hero from the Army of the United States of America." He grabbed the parachute next to him and jumped. The fourth passenger, ex-President George W. Bush, said to the fifth passenger, a 10-year-old schoolgirl, "I have lived a full life and served my country the best I could. I will sacrifice my life and let you have the last parachute." The little girl said, "That's okay, Mr. President. There's a parachute left for you. Australia's smartest man just took my school bag." A police officer pulled over a car for speeding and approached the driver's side window. "Officer, sir, may I see your driver's license?" Driver, "I don't have one. Got suspended after my 5th DUI." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Not good." Officer, "All right. Can I see the registration for this vehicle?" Driver, "Not my car. I stole it." The officer stiffened. This just got worse. "Officer, you're telling me this car is stolen?" Driver, "Yep, but now that you mention it, I think I saw the owner's registration in the glove box right next to my gun." Officer, "There's a gun in the glove box?" Driver, "Yes, sir. That's where I put it after I shot the woman who owns this car and stuffed her in the trunk." The officer backed away slowly and immediately called for backup. Within minutes, multiple squad cars arrived, lights flashing. The captain himself stepped out, approaching cautiously. "Captain, sir, may I see your license?" The driver shrugged and handed it over. It was valid. "Captain, and this car? Who does it belong to?" Driver, "Me, of course. Here's the registration." The captain examined the papers, everything checked out. "Captain, would you mind opening the glove box? We were told there's a gun in there." Driver, "Sure, but there's no gun." The officer opened the glove box. Empty. Captain, "All right. Now, can you pop the trunk?" The driver complied. The trunk swung open completely empty. No sign of a body. The captain turned to his officer, arms crossed. I don't get it. This officer said you told him you didn't have a license, stole the car, had a gun in the glove box, and a body in the trunk. The driver shook his head and smirked. Driver, yeah, and I bet the liar told you I was speeding too. A bright, ambitious young executive had just been appointed as the CEO of a major tech firm. On his first day, his predecessor, a seasoned leader with years of experience, met with him privately and handed him 3 sealed envelopes numbered 1 through 3. When you find yourself in trouble and don't know what to do, open these one at a time, the outgoing CEO advised before walking away. At first, things went smoothly. The company was thriving, profits were strong, and morale was high, but 6 months into his tenure, sales suddenly plummeted. Customers were leaving, the board was restless, and pressure was mounting. Desperate for guidance, the young CEO remembered the envelopes. He opened the first one. Blame your predecessor. So he did, tactfully. At a press conference, he acknowledged the challenges but pointed to past decisions that had led to the downturn. The board, the media, and investors responded favorably. Stock prices recovered, and the crisis was averted. A year later, the company hit another rough patch: product delays, operational inefficiencies, and another dip in sales. This time, the CEO didn't hesitate. He opened the second envelope. Reorganize. Without delay, he announced a major restructuring, bringing in fresh leadership, reshuffling teams, and streamlining operations. The bold move worked. The company bounced back, profits soared, and the CEO was once again praised for his decisive action. But success was fleeting. After another period of prosperity, the company faced its biggest challenge yet, a crisis that threatened its very future. Feeling the weight of the moment, the CEO retreated to his office, shut the door, and reached for the final envelope. He took a deep breath and opened it. Inside, a short message read, "Prepare 3 envelopes." A man steps into the confessional and begins, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." "What is your sin, my son?" the priest asks. Well, the man says, "I used some terrible language this week, and I feel awful about it." "When did you use this awful language?" the priest inquires. "I was out golfing," the man explains. "I hit an absolutely perfect drive, looked like it was going to clear 250 yards, but then out of nowhere it smacked right into a phone line hanging over the fairway and dropped straight to the ground, barely making it 100 yards. "Ah." The priest nods knowingly. "Is that when you swore?" "No, Father," the man replies. "Then what happened?" "Well, right after that, a squirrel darted out from the bushes, grabbed my ball in its mouth, and took off running." The priest leans in. "And that is when you swore?" "No, not yet," says the man, "because just as the squirrel was making its escape, an eagle swooped down, snatched it up in its talons, and soared into the sky with my ball still in the squirrel's mouth." The priest, now intrigued, asks, "Surely that's when you swore?" "Nope," the man says, "because as the eagle was flying over the green, the squirrel squirmed, dropped my ball, and it fell perfectly toward the hole." The priest's eyes widen. "And then you swore?" "Not quite," the man continues. "The ball hit a tree, bounced through some bushes, ricocheted off a rock, rolled through the sand trap, and stopped just 6 inches from the cup." The priest lets out a deep sigh, shaking his head. "You missed the putt, didn't you?" A woman in her mid-40s went to a plastic surgeon to discuss getting a facelift. The surgeon, eager to show her the latest advancement, introduced a revolutionary procedure called the button. This small button is placed at the top of a woman's head, and with a simple twist it tightens the skin, providing an instant facelift effect. Naturally, the woman was intrigued and decided to go for the button. Over the years, she turned it every now and then, and it kept her looking fresh, youthful, and rejuvenated. But after 15 years of using it, she came back to the surgeon, looking a bit distressed. "Doctor," she said, "I love the results, but I'm having 2 problems. First, I have these awful bags under my eyes, and no matter how many times I turn the button, they don't go away." The doctor took a close look at her and then said, "Well, those aren't bags. Those are your knees." The woman blinked, paused for a second, and sighed. "Great, I guess I'm not even going to bother asking about the double chin."